There's a racetrack feeling at today's Volkswagen Innovation Talk. Hello and welcome. Driving dynamics is our topic today. And this is why we're right next to the racecourse at Bilsterberg. What have we got today? Well, first of all, it's great that you've joined us for today's Innovation Talk. We'll be talking about driving dynamics. We'll look at the philosophy behind driving dynamics development at Volkswagen, how our production cars benefit, and most of all, our performance cars. We have highly interesting experts joining us today, and we'll be taking a look at the future and how this philosophy will improve our cars. That sounds great. Let's go. And I'd say, let's go. Right, our experts are ready. May I introduce Karsten Schebsdat, Head of Volkswagen Driving Dynamics, and Jan Schiedek-Jagd, Head of Technical Development at Volkswagen R. Hello, and thanks for joining us. We have a great setting here with the racetrack sound in the back approaching, which we love hearing, right? The sound is that of really great R-line cars. And it's the perfect cue for our topic, driving dynamics today. It's a bit of a buzzword in the automotive world today. Can you give us an idea in a few sentences of how you define driving dynamics and why it's so important? Driving dynamics is central. We are looking into how a car handles, steers, brakes, and driving comfort. These are all factors that directly impact how a car feels during active driving. We're shaping the way customers and drivers feel our cars emotionally, directly designing and optimizing the experience. It's about how the handling and the road holding feels when you drive. Let's put Volkswagen driving dynamics into the timeline's context now. We'll show you how it all began and where we are today. Driving dynamics during the course of history, a great look back. Driving dynamics and the racecourse, that's obviously a perfect fit. Can you tell us about driving dynamics and production cars for the road? In motorsport and performance in general, performance is extremely important here. For success, performance is central, which is why other properties like comfort and cabin noise take a back seat if they impact the performance. In our production cars, we want to use our motorsports experience, but also to ensure everyday usability. You don't want to force drivers to use earplugs all the time or to have aching muscles after an hour's driving. That's convincing. Karsten, what is driving dynamics at Volkswagen about? Looking at the GTI models and the R models, you and your team are developing what makes them so special when it comes to dynamic driving. Well, as I mentioned earlier, emotions are very important for our cars. When you want a car to be emotionally engaging, it needs to be agile, have direct steering. When you drive at high speeds, you don't want the car to feel nervous. You want it to feel stable at high speeds. To have the best of both worlds is what VW Dynamics and our DNA are specifically about. And that is why stability, which I've just mentioned, is so central. The customer has to know precisely how the suspension will react in the next moment. If you turn the steering wheel by 10 degrees and the car will react with 0.2 g lateral acceleration, double that steering angle, I get exactly double the lateral acceleration. As a driver, you can always read the car in an optimal fashion. The driver always knows when the car approaches its limits, and that is what journalists have been reflecting back at us in their reviews on a regular basis. As you get inside a VW, you are fast from the outset because the car communicates directly with you. You've given the perfect cue. Journalists and media content creators, we've asked around and got them their take on things.
I think the most important point about the VW Golf R variant is that you have a good mix of sportiness and comfort. So you have a lot of sportiness on the racetrack, for example. It works, but most of the time people will not drive it on the racetrack. So it's even more important to have good comfort in everyday driving life. And you have nice sport seats, for example, which hold you tight, but at the same time offer good comfort, and also suspension. It's just a good mix. I think that's the right mix. Some other sports cars go in a too sporty direction, but here I think they really nailed it on the spot. And I think it works today and even also in the future.
I prefer sporty cars when I feel direct feedback from the car, from the steering, from the transmission, from the engine. So I think this is the most important thing for me when I'm driving the car. Of course, the power of the engine is very important, and the steering and the feeling from the car, but it is also important that when the car helps me to become a better driver, I like it.
Now that was very interesting to hear. Jan, we've briefly mentioned this earlier, so customers don't just want the performance apparently. Yes, and I think this aligns perfectly with our design philosophy. Customers are offered a vehicle with a wide usage scope, from different color lines that you can configure to a very comfortable car, or, if they want to, something that can handle a racetrack. Very well, let's hear what some other media are saying.
I would say it should be comfortable, but if we're talking about a more sportier car, in this case the Golf R, in the same time it should be sporty when I want it to be sporty. So it's easier to say than to achieve it, I think, but in this case this one is quite a good example of this, so it's a nice car. I'm quite a petrol head guy, so I really like petrol and consumption engines. I really like the sound of these V8, V10, I don't know, big engines. But I also know electrification is coming. We are going to have electric cars in the future, and I would say let's use the low center of gravity of the batteries and make quite a fun car, I would say. Maybe all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive fun driving cars.
It's very interesting to get this feedback from the media, but let's look at what things look like as we apply what we've just heard to a concrete model. What's a better fit than applying this to the latest Volkswagen R-Line model, the Golf R variant estate? Jan, what was the focus on this model in terms of driving dynamics? Well, the new Golf R variant is the most powerful and dynamic Golf variant estate that Volkswagen has ever launched. It was important for us to combine the performance with practicality in everyday use. For me, it is the ideal combination between the Golf R and the variant estate model. Driving dynamics, performance, and the emotions of the R line paired with the variability, everyday usability and qualities of an estate. This balance was what we struck out to achieve, and I think we've succeeded quite well. Very well, we've talked about it, now let's see it in action. We do exactly that. Here it comes, the Golf R estate in its element.
It's the largest and most powerful Golf of all time. The new Golf R variant combines performance with storage, acceleration with legroom, excitement with everyday utility, and power with versatility. It bridges the gap between the things a car needs to do and all the things that are fun to do in a car. Its 2-liter TSI engine delivers 320 horsepower. Its all-wheel drive system responds extremely quickly, and the R Performance torque vectoring system allows for faster cornering speeds. The Golf R variant is a step forward in every way. It's more dynamic, more efficient, safer and more practical. It's a daily driver and a track star.
It It is a fascinating car indeed, the Golf R variant estate. Seeing this, you really want to get in and give it a spin. And we are in exactly the right place to do that. The pit lane, right up close, where the action happens with the awesome R models. And Jan is with us. Jan, the Golf. It now features the Masters system that controls and links all driving dynamics components we know from other Volkswagen models. What exactly is it? We call it the Driving Dynamics Manager. That is not a Volkswagen employee, but the central control room, as it were, for all driving dynamics components, where they communicate continually and achieve the best results for each handling situation. And that happens automatically, continually, and reacts and adjusts within microseconds. Amazing! That sounds intriguing, even talking about it. And I'm sure it's even more fascinating when you give it a spin, which is what Benedict is asking someone who has.
Benny, we're now driving the Golf GTI on the Bilsterberg track. In your own words, what makes the Golf GTI special? We have 300 horsepower. We have a front axle differential lock, two-wheel drive, and a wonderful DSG gearbox. And we have the Vehicle Dynamics Manager on board. What does this system do? The Dynamics Manager is like a number 10 player in football. It connects all of the systems and does it fast. In this way, it gives me maximum traction at all times and neutral behavior in corners. We are now sitting in the Golf R. What are the differences in the Dynamics Manager compared to the Golf GTI? Well, the Dynamics Manager here has the same task as the one in the Golf GTI, meaning the connection of all the individual systems. However, here in the Golf R, it needs to attend to all four wheels, because here the torque splitter gives us an all-wheel drive system, which we don't have in the GTI. How will customers feel the changes, and how can they make their own adjustments? Well, first of all, we can set various driving modes, such as comfort, sport, and race. The Dynamics Manager can influence every system, meaning the steering, the DDC, and of course the torque splitter. For example, if I switch from comfort to race, everything gets a lot tighter, and the car knows that we want to have some fun, or we might even be on a racetrack. Everything becomes very agile. The steering wheel gets tighter, the chassis as well, so it feels more direct, and the torque splitter works a little harder. So the outboard wheel receives a bit more power. So the car turns much better mid-corner, and there's hardly any understeering. So the Vehicle Dynamics Manager is like a conductor of a good orchestra, who guides and controls the musicians. Absolutely, it connects the individual systems at tremendous speed, providing me with an extremely agile vehicle.
The Driving Dynamics Manager not only assists you on the racetrack, but in extreme situations as well. Jan, I'm sure you can give us a concrete example of everyday driving where I can feel this intelligent network as an ordinary driver. Well, a good case in point is going around tight bends or steering into corners. The system can improve driving dynamics by slightly decelerating or braking the inner radius wheels. And the adjustable suspension or shock absorbers can counter the rolling forces. And I can use the latest all-wheel drive, which on the R models accelerates the outer radius rear wheel with additional torque directed there. The Driving Dynamics Manager will control which of these is best, which system is best suited for the job. Sometimes one of these systems will get a rest, while one of the other systems takes over. That's a great thing, and all this happens in the background without the driver noticing. He can focus on his main job, which is driving. Karsten, we keep talking of all these components which are interconnected. What are the most important components in this network? To my mind, driving dynamics engineering can be broken down into 4 fields. Classic, hardware, design, where we focus on the engineering of axles, steering and braking systems. Second, and no less important, is to develop the typical VW DNA, designing the software for the steering system to bring home the haptic qualities of the system. Third, adjustable dampers or shock absorbers. The suspension contribute noticeably to dynamic handling and not just a comfort feature. Fourth, as Jan just mentioned, the aptly named Driving Dynamics Manager, which galvanizes the multitude of individual components into one smooth system. We'll be looking at the detail of the suspension, and Benny and Jonas have a few things to show us and to explain.
We are sitting in the new Golf R variant. A lot has changed in terms of the chassis compared to the predecessor. We have a driving dynamics manager, known from the Golf 8, which connects the individual systems. There is a torque splitter on the rear axle, which distributes power to the rear wheels. And for the first time in the Golf R, we have a negative camber on the front axle for more cornering accuracy, which leads to higher speeds, particularly on the Nordschleife. The comparison on the slalom course shows the advances made with the Golf 8 regarding precision and dynamic performance compared against the Golf 7. Compared to its predecessor, the Golf 8 is far more dynamic. It's more agile in corners with more precise steering. We achieved this by increasing the negative camber on the Golf 8R and the GTI Club Sport. This allows us to realize higher cornering forces. The Sport chassis lowers the body by 20 mm compared to the Golf variant. Engineers have tuned the chassis of the Golf R variant on the Nordschleife with the goal of achieving extraordinary performance while maintaining optimal touring properties. The vehicle can be adjusted from comfortable to sporty. The comfort setting is best suited for long-distance driving, while the sport setting is perfect for the racetrack and winding country roads. The vehicle offers 2 things at once: sporty performance and a comfortable ride. And that offers speed on the racetrack and safety for everyday driving.
A cool contribution, which has shown very clearly, Jan, that by adjusting each element of the suspension, you can change a lot of the car's qualities and properties. Yes, that's true. And it's impressive to see how a car's handling influences the overall character of the car, and of course in particular when you're looking at a Volkswagen product. When we talk about handling properties, we not only mean driving dynamics and stability, but particularly for our R models, we are talking lap times, not only the Bilsterberg racecourse, but of course the Nürburgring Nordschleife home racecourse section. Do you agree, Karsten? Absolutely. The Nürburgring Nordschleife is where suspension tuning is really put to the test, and challenging for us as well. We entered the fray with an excellently balanced suspension, which is further tweaked by the experts on the ground. Tires, suspension, stabilizers and shock absorbers, the software we've configured with its parameters, everything is fine-tuned to get the optimum out of the system, honing the car to cross the finish line with perfect lap times. The customer who, at the end of the day, as he decides to buy the car, feels these emotions. Now, I'm sure they'll feel the excitement of the lap times when chasing milliseconds on the racetrack. Of course, it's not only the perfect lap time, but also safety that's important. And for these 2 factors, there's a special component that plays a central role, and Benedikt, Benny and Jonas have just had a closer look at it.
In our vehicles, we call the torque splitter R Performance Torque Vectoring. We have it in the Golf R, the Arteon R and the Tiguan R. What's it all about, Jonas? There's a torque splitter on the rear axle. It distributes the power from the engine across the rear axle. It lets us bring more power to the outboard wheel in a corner or the inboard one if necessary. This makes the vehicle much safer and, of course, more agile in corners. Could Benny show us? Of course, let's do it. We're sitting in the Golf R to see how the torque splitter works. This display shows us how the power gets distributed to the wheels, particularly in the rear. Only when I accelerate and turn the steering wheel, I can see it shifting power from right to left in the rear. Correct. And even if you're not on a racetrack, the torque splitter will improve safety and driving stability. As soon as the control system detects understeering, more power is distributed to the outboard wheel in the corner, which rotates the vehicle a little. Now we're going into a corner and I'll be taking it too fast on purpose. The car understeers and I step on the gas, and the car evens out. So you can steer the car using the gas pedal. Right, the car gets traction, but it doesn't fidget around. To me as a driver, it behaves in a very linear and anticipated way. So the car gives you an added way of keeping it straight. Usually you would do this by applying the brake, using the ESC. But now you can accelerate individual wheels on the rear axle in a targeted way to improve stability. Okay then, let's demonstrate it. It's fun, isn't it? Very cool. I could do this all day.
They've looked like they were having fun getting the best out of this. And Karsten, I'm sure you've given drift mode a spin, haven't you? Is it as much fun as it looks? Yes, it's great fun. Drifting sideways through the corners in a Golf R is everything a driver's heart desires. And what is great about the system is that on the round course, you are more stable on the track and faster as well. Just how a torque splitter functions and how it works, we've seen just now. Jan, I'm sure you'll explain in greater detail on this model or demo part which we have here. And I'd like to ask you, does it need such a sophisticated system? Or would a simple locking differential not get the job done? Well, the locking differential cannot channel or distribute torque to individual wheels, as opposed to our torque splitter. This cross-section model shows you how it functions. The prop shaft comes in at the front. There's a clutch or coupling at each side, which can be engaged or opened continually, but reacts within microseconds. Depending on the driving situation and the driving profile selected, each wheel gets optimal torque right up to drift mode. And as we've just heard, the entire drive torque can be on one rear axle wheel. And the name drift mode, as we've seen, means business. Yes, what that looks like, we've impressively seen just now. So hitting the accelerator is even more fun with the torque splitter on board. When you really floor it, however, the brakes are of course increasingly important, and how these are special on Volkswagen performance models is something worth taking a closer look at now.
Viewed from the side, every R model is immediately recognizable by its brakes. With a distinct color and design, they are now 18 inches in size for reliable performance. With the 18-inch brake system from performance models, we get better braking accuracy on the racetrack without fading. A brake system is a finely tuned assembly, and the faster and more dynamic a car is, the more power its engine provides, the more performance is required from the brakes. Compared to their predecessors, the brakes in the new R model cars have become bigger while getting lighter at the same time. The brake system consists of a brake disc with a diameter of 357 mm and a thickness of 34 mm, and the caliper with 2 pistons. The disc itself consists of 2 parts. These elements are pinned together, thereby dispersing heat evenly and leading to a decrease in weight by 600 grams per side. This brake system is used in the Arteon R, the Tiguan R, the Golf R, and now also in the Golf R variant. I am entering our brake lane at 80 km per hour while working the brakes at their limit. I can feel the ABS working. Braking accuracy is good. I get good feedback from the car. I can tell how and when my car brakes, and I can control it well with the pedal. And so the new brake system delivers the performance desired by dynamic drivers. Optimal braking, even at high stress, on the racetrack and in everyday driving.
It was absolutely impressive to see what the here and now offers even as we speak. This makes you wonder what the future has in the pipeline. Which avenue will driving dynamics engineering take, and what are the options to improve change and hone things even further? These are the questions that made us pay Volkswagen R&D Engineering an extensive visit.
In terms of driving dynamics, driving and steering behavior are as decisive as comfort. And since driving comfort will become even more important in the future, we're currently developing a new control chassis, which we brought along in this vehicle. As a comparison, we also brought a regular production vehicle with a normal adaptive chassis. We created some driving footage that will show the difference between these two very impressively. For the sake of completeness, we were also able to demonstrate a conventional chassis with this vehicle here. The difference is obvious. The new chassis glides across the bumps. There is no pitching, and the car is very composed. The current production chassis looks a lot more nervous when it comes to pitching and rolling, and the new chassis is able to make the car a lot calmer. This makes the ride a lot more comfortable for the passengers. The differences are even more pronounced compared to the conventional chassis, which is the most unsettled of the three. The latest chassis is the calmest and the best one and performs on a completely different level. The differences between the three chassis have become very clear, and that's something that we and our customers can look forward to, particularly in future when the car will become more autonomous and customers may want to read a book or something like that. They can look forward to a very comfortable ride. And the great thing about the new chassis is not only improved comfort, but also improved dynamics. We are able to reduce rolling. The car responds more quickly to steering inputs. It handles more precisely, and that improves driving fun. Now that we have dealt with the chassis, we are now moving on to the steering system, which is the main connection between driver and car, and is not only important when it comes to steering feedback, but also in terms of the car's driving behavior. We developed a new steering system which is featured in this car. As you said, this car has the new steering system, whose software gives us a lot more opportunities to influence steering properties in such a way that we can respond to requirements with regard to certain car models or customer preferences. You picked a particular setting for the steering system. Which one did you choose? It's the standard setting. It should feel completely normal. Yes, the car responds very well and feels precise. Even greater inputs feel quite linear. It's just like you expect from a production vehicle. It's a very good basis for the new steering system. It feels very much like a production car. What other choices do we have? Well, you could select a different driving profile, like Sport, for example. That's a very direct and sporty mode. In this case, we made software adjustments, which shows that software is becoming an increasingly important part of our work. And here we have implemented a very direct setting. Okay, let's give it a try. Oh yes, I could feel that immediately. It almost feels like a go-kart. It's super direct. It only needs very small inputs, but the car responds well too. And when I go faster, the steering becomes less direct, meaning we're going back to a more normal steering response. It feels very stable, even with greater inputs. The steering bandwidth is quite impressive. Yes, and the software gives us the opportunity to respond to all kinds of platforms and models in our portfolio. This also opens opportunities in optimizing driver assistance systems. A lane assist or travel assist system can benefit quite a bit from the steering system in terms of haptics. As with the steering system and the chassis earlier, we're seeing a lot of potential, but what these systems look like in detail and when they go into production cannot be revealed at this time.
Now that sounds really amazing. And so we can expect any number of interesting things headed our way, Benedikt, and we've seen some of them during our program today. In a nutshell, what are your conclusions? Thanks a lot, and I was quite amazed today. I personally have 4 key takeaways from today's talk. First, that Volkswagen's driving dynamics engineering is guided by a clear philosophy based on our brand DNA. Second, the driving dynamics are complemented by driving comfort and safety. Third, with the driving dynamics manager, we have a central unit which controls and combines all these facets. And last but not least, as we look to the future, we see highly automated driving, and we'll ensure that that happens with the highest precision, with the highest driving comfort and safety. Certainly, the here and now is extremely interesting, and we're looking forward to what the future offers. That was it from us today, and Benedikt and we are thanking you for joining us today and for your interest. And yes, thanks for being with us. And we're looking forward to our next Innovation Talk.